My parents gave my brother dollar for 50K, then tried to take my house. My parents sold their house and handed $450,000 to my brother. Then they tried to invade my home like they owned it, until my next move left them completely stunned. I'm 38, married to Kayla for 6 years. She's a brilliant architect with a solid income, while I built a custom furniture business from absolutely nothing. We own 2 properties, our comfortable family home, and a rental investment I purchased 3 years ago. My tenants, Max and Jenny, are ideal renters who pay promptly and never create issues. Here's where family complications begin. My parents raised 2 sons, myself and Elias, my 35-year-old younger brother who has somehow avoided real employment his entire adult life. Since college graduation, which our parents funded completely, he's bounced between ridiculous business ventures that consistently drain their savings. Meanwhile, when I wanted to start my business, did I receive family support? Absolutely not. Dad called it too risky and suggested pursuing stable employment with benefits. But when Elias declared himself an entrepreneur, suddenly everyone celebrated his vision and potential. Currently, Elias is engaged to Daphne, a woman with expensive preferences and zero comprehension of money sources. She constantly sports new clothing, travels frequently, and discusses their luxury lifestyle. On what income? Excellent question. Elias remains between ventures again, surviving on parental generosity while exploring new opportunities. Daphne doesn't work either, focusing instead on wedding planning and building her brand through selfies and makeup tutorials for her 847 Instagram followers. 3 months ago, everything derailed. My parents called, excited about selling their 30-year family home worth approximately $450,000. I assumed they were downsizing for retirement, perhaps moving to a 55-plus community for easier maintenance. Mom explained they received an excellent price and felt thrilled about their new chapter. Then she dropped the bombshell. We gave all the money to Elias as his wedding gift. I thought I'd misheard. You gave him what? All of it? $450,000. He found this beautiful penthouse downtown, and we wanted to help him start his new life with Daphne. My mental calculations were disturbing. If the penthouse cost more than their entire house sale, and they gave him everything, where exactly would my parents live? Turns out Elias discovered a $1.2 million penthouse in the trendy downtown district, complete with concierge services. My parents provided their life savings as a down payment while he planned to finance the remainder. On what income? Still that great unanswered question. What about your retirement? I asked Mom. Oh, we have everything figured out, she said cheerfully. We're moving into your rental house. Just like that. Not would you consider, or could we discuss, or even do you think that might work? A straight announcement that they were commandeering my investment property. I asked about my current tenants. Apparently, that wasn't relevant because I could simply tell Max and Jenny to leave. Break a legal lease and destroy 2 innocent people's lives because my parents needed housing after giving away their house money. The entitlement was breathtaking. They'd made this massive financial decision without consulting anyone, funded my brother's luxury lifestyle with their security, then assumed I'd solve their housing crisis by destroying my rental income and legal obligations. When I refused, Dad's voice turned ice cold. We raised you, Joshua. This is what family does for each other. Family. The same family that funded Elias's college, but not mine. The same family that bankrolled his failed businesses while telling me to be realistic. The same family that just handed him $500,000 while expecting me to provide free housing. I told them I'd call back, and hung up. Kayla had overheard enough to understand the situation. Please tell me you're not actually considering this, she said. Not for a second, but I know this is just the beginning. My parents don't accept no for an answer, especially when they believe they're entitled to something. I had no idea how ugly this would become. Last Tuesday, while working in my shop, my phone started ringing frantically. Max was calling, and something made me answer despite my concentration. Joshua, we need help. There are people at our front door claiming they own this house. My stomach dropped. What do you mean claiming they own it? They have suitcases, and they're banging on the door telling us we need to pack up and leave. The woman is screaming that this is their house now, and we're trespassing. I already knew who it was. Did they give you names? They said they're your parents. Of course they did. I told Max not to open the door under any circumstances and rushed across town. The drive felt surreal. I kept hoping for some misunderstanding, but deep down I knew exactly what was happening. My parents had decided that since I wouldn't voluntarily surrender my rental property, they'd simply take it. I arrived to find Mom and Dad on the front porch with 2 large suitcases and shopping bags. Mom was pounding the door with her fist while Dad stood authoritatively, like a landlord collecting rent. This is ridiculous. Mom was yelling. We know you're in there. Open the store right now. I could see Max and Jenny's curtains moving. They were probably terrified but smart enough not to answer. My parents saw me approaching, and Mom immediately switched from angry to relieved. Joshua, thank goodness you're here. These people won't leave. Mom, what are you doing? We're moving in. We told you we needed somewhere to live. And I told you that wasn't happening. Dad stepped forward with that stern expression from my childhood. Son, we've been staying at Extended Stay America for 2 weeks waiting for you to handle this situation. 2 weeks in a hotel instead of looking for apartments, calling realtors, or doing anything responsible adults do when they need housing. You've been staying at a hotel because you chose to sell your house and give the money away, I said. That's not my problem to solve. We're your parents, and they're my tenants with a legal lease. That's when Mom completely lost control, screaming about my ingratitude, their sacrifices, how a good son would care for his parents. The entire neighborhood could hear her. Dad tried a different approach. Look, we already gave our notice at the hotel. Our checkout is today. We have nowhere else to go. Notice how that was supposed to be my emergency. They'd painted themselves into a corner and expected me to solve it by destroying 2 innocent people's lives. Max cracked the door open. Is everything okay? Should we call someone? Everything's fine, I told him. My parents are leaving. We are not leaving, Mom shrieked. This is family property. That's when I lost patience. This is my property. I bought it with my money from my business that I built with zero help from either of you. Dad started his guilt trip about everything they'd done for me. What exactly did you do for me, Dad? Because I'm having trouble remembering all this help you're talking about. He got flustered, stammering about raising me and providing for me. You provided the legal minimum required to not get arrested for child neglect. Meanwhile, you're currently funding Elias's penthouse lifestyle while demanding I give you free housing. Mom was crying now, playing the victim. Where are we supposed to go? Literally anywhere that isn't my rental property. The entire situation was insane. They'd created this problem themselves, ignored every reasonable solution, and were now forcing me to fix it by destroying my business relationships. Max spoke up again. Should I call the police? My parents stared at him like he'd suggested an airstrike. You wouldn't dare involve the police in a family matter, Dad said. He absolutely would, I replied. And so would I. You're trespassing. That's when things got really ugly. Mom started screaming about choosing strangers over family, how she was ashamed to have raised such a selfish son, how my dead grandmother would be rolling in her grave. Dad went for the throat. Your brother would never treat us like this. You're right. My brother would take your money and let you live in your car. At least I'm being honest about saying no. I turned to Max. If they're not off this property in 5 minutes, call 911. This isn't over, Dad said as he grabbed a suitcase. They loaded their belongings while Mom cried about what a horrible son I was. The last thing I heard before they drove off was Dad yelling that I'd regret this. After they left, I apologized to Max and Jenny for the drama. They'd been hiding in their bedroom for 20 minutes before I arrived, genuinely scared these people might break down the door. I gave them my direct number and told them to call immediately if my parents returned. I also said I'd understand if they wanted to break their lease after this harassment. But I knew my parents weren't finished. People who think they're entitled to your property don't give up after one rejection. They escalate. The next day, my phone started ringing constantly, every hour on the hour. Different numbers, different relatives, all with identical messages about me being a terrible son abandoning his parents. First call came from Aunt Susan at 7 a.m. I was barely awake, coffee still brewing, and she was lecturing me about family values and elder respect. Apparently, my parents had called her crying about their ungrateful son, leaving them homeless. Joshua, how could you do this to them? They're your parents. I tried explaining the situation, but she cut me off. I don't want to hear excuses. Figure out a way to help them. Then she hung up. An hour later, my cousin Noah called. I hadn't talked to him in 3 years, but suddenly he was very concerned about my character. Same script about abandoning family and choosing money over parents. They raised you, man. You owe them. They raised my brother too, and he's the one with their money. That's different. How is it different? Click. Another hang-up. This pattern continued all day. By noon, I'd received 8 phone calls and 15 text messages. Long guilt trips about family loyalty, parental sacrifices, breaking their hearts. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from relatives recruited for this campaign. Here's what really bothered me. Not one person asked for my side of the story. They all accepted my parents' version and decided I was the villain. My cousin Phoebe sent a long Facebook message about my parents living like refugees in a hotel and how I could sleep at night knowing they were suffering. Living like refugees because they chose to sell their house and give the money away. Where were all these traditional values when my parents funded Elias's lifestyle for 15 years? Where was the family concern when I worked 3 jobs to pay for college? But here's what really infuriated me. Not one of these righteous family members offered to help my parents themselves. They all had strong opinions about what I should do, but somehow none had spare bedrooms or guest houses. When I pointed this out to Aunt Susan during her second call, she got flustered. Well, we don't have the space. I don't have space either. That's why I rent it to people. You have more money. There it was. The real reason. Because I worked hard and built a successful business, I was obligated to solve everyone's problems. Because I'd been financially responsible, I should subsidize everyone's bad decisions. By Wednesday, I'd had enough. I sat down and wrote the most comprehensive email of my life, taking 2 hours to get it exactly right. I wanted it clear, factual, and impossible to misinterpret. Subject line: setting the record straight. The full story. I started with the timeline. Parents sell house for $450,000. Parents give all money to Elias for penthouse down payment. Parents announce they're moving into my rental property without asking. I say no and offer to help them find appropriate housing. They refuse and demand I evict my legal tenants. Then I attach documentation, screenshots of text messages, photos of the lease agreement, property records showing when I bought the house, and how much I paid. I wanted everyone to see exactly what they were asking me to do. The email was probably 2,000 words long, going through everything point by point. But the best part was the ending. I listed every person who had called or texted me about family duty and obligation. Then I wrote, since everyone is so concerned about my parents' housing situation, I'm sure one of you will be happy to provide them with a place to stay. After all, family helps family, right? Please let me know your move-in date for mom and dad, so I can give them your address. I hit send at 11 p.m. Wednesday night to 30 people. My phone was silent Thursday morning. First time in 3 days, I wasn't awakened by angry relatives. Around noon, I started getting responses falling into 3 categories: people who suddenly remembered they didn't have space after all, people who went completely silent, and people who doubled down and got nastier. Uncle Bob was in category 3, sending a long reply about destroying the family and turning my back on the people who made me who I am. Really dramatic stuff about dishonoring ancestors and breaking blood bonds. I replied with one sentence. What's your move-in date? He never responded. The family Facebook group went completely silent. All those posts about duty and respect disappeared. Funny how that works. By Friday, the phone calls had stopped. Either people realized they'd been fed a story or figured out I wasn't backing down. The harassment campaign ended as quickly as it started. But I wasn't done yet. I had one more call to make. I called Elias directly Friday afternoon. He picked up on the first ring like he'd been waiting. Josh, what the hell did you send to everyone? The truth. You got a problem with that. You're making the whole family look bad. We went back and forth for 10 minutes. He tried every angle, how mom and dad needed help, how I was being selfish, how family should stick together. All the same stuff I'd been hearing all week. Finally, I cut to the point. You've got their money, Elias. You figure out their housing. I hung up and waited to see what would happen next. I didn't have to wait long. The first sign something was wrong came from my cousin Maria, basically the only family member who stayed neutral during the whole mess, probably because she has her own drama and doesn't have time for more. She texted me one random Tuesday afternoon. Hey, did you know Elias is having problems with his penthouse purchase? I hadn't heard anything, but it didn't surprise me. Financing a $1.2 million place when you've never had steady employment tends to be complicated. What kind of problems? I texted back. Bank is asking for employment verification and income statements. Apparently, that's harder to provide than he thought. No kidding. Turns out banks actually want proof you can pay back massive loans. Revolutionary concept. Maria didn't have all the details, but over the next few weeks, the story came together through the family grapevine. The bank had initially pre-approved Elias based on my parents' down payment and projections about his consulting business. But when it came time for final approval, they wanted actual documentation, pay stubs, tax returns, bank statements, all that boring paperwork proving you're not just some deadbeat looking to live beyond your means. Problem was, Elias didn't have any of that because he doesn't actually make money. His consulting business was basically him calling himself an entrepreneur and occasionally meeting people for coffee to discuss opportunities. No clients, no contracts, no revenue, just a website and business cards. The bank laughed him out of the office. Without the loan, he couldn't buy the penthouse. Without buying the penthouse, he couldn't get his deposit back. And that deposit was a big chunk of my parents' house money. But wait, it gets better. Elias and Daphne had been planning this massive wedding, 200 plus guests, fancy venue, open bar, the whole production. Because when you're living off your parents' retirement fund, why not go all out? The wedding venue wanted final payment 2 weeks before the ceremony. Elias called my parents asking them to cover it since they'd already invested so much in his future. My parents had to explain they'd given him literally everything and were currently living in a 1-bedroom apartment they could barely afford. So Elias started reaching out to family members for loans, and we all knew he wasn't planning to pay anyone back. Hey, I'm just short on the wedding venue payment. Could you help me out? It's just temporary until my business picks up. I got a text from him too. Josh, I know we've had our differences, but I could really use your help with the venue payment. It's only $15,000. Only $15,000. Like that's pocket change. I didn't even reply. Apparently, nobody else did either because the venue ended up canceling their booking 3 days before the wedding. Just straight up told them the room wasn't available anymore because payment hadn't been received. They ended up having the ceremony in Daphne's backyard. Half the guests didn't show up because of the last-minute venue change. The other half spent the whole time whispering about what a disaster it was. According to Maria, Daphne cried through most of the reception about how this wasn't how she'd imagined her special day. Meanwhile, the same week as their backyard wedding disaster, I closed on my third property. I'd been looking at this commercial building for months, needed work, but had great potential. The previous owner was motivated to sell, and I got it for about $40,000 under market value. My plan was to renovate and either flip it or rent it for commercial space. I posted a casual photo on Instagram of the keys and paperwork, another project in the works. Sometimes patience pays off. Nothing dramatic, just a normal business update. A few family members liked the post. I noticed my parents didn't. But the story wasn't over yet. My parents were about to make one last desperate play. Last Saturday morning, I was having coffee with Kayla in our kitchen, talking about baby names and looking at paint samples for the nursery walls. Nice, peaceful morning. Exactly the kind of quiet family time I'd been looking forward to. Then our Ring doorbell started going off. I looked at my phone and saw my parents standing on our front porch, both dressed up nice. Mom held a bouquet of flowers and what looked like a grocery bag. Dad had this weird forced smile like he was trying to sell me something. They were talking directly to the camera like it was a video call. Joshua, we know you're home, Mom said in this overly sweet voice. We can see your car in the driveway. I looked at Kayla. She was already shaking her head. We brought groceries to cook for you, Dad chimed in, holding up the bag. Your mother wants to make that pot roast you used to love. The manipulation was incredible. They'd shown up uninvited with props designed to make me feel guilty. Flowers and food like this was some normal family visit instead of another attempt to bulldoze my boundaries. We've been thinking about everything that happened, Mom continued to the camera. We made mistakes. We should have asked her permission about the rental house. Too little, too late. About 8 months too late. I'm watching this whole performance on my phone while sitting 20 feet away from them. The audacity was breathtaking. After months of harassment, manipulation, and trying to destroy my business relationships, they thought they could just show up with flowers and reset everything. Kayla looked at me like, please tell me you're not falling for this. I'm not answering the door, I told her. But my parents weren't giving up easily. They stood there for about 10 minutes taking turns talking to the camera, explaining how sorry they were and how much they missed me. Mom even started crying at one point, doing that whole victim routine she's perfected over the years. When it became obvious I wasn't coming to the door, Dad's tone changed. Joshua, this is ridiculous. We're your parents. Open the door so we can talk like adults. That's when I made my decision. I called the police non-emergency line. I need to report trespassing. I have individuals on my property who refuse to leave, and I have a previous incident report involving the same people. The dispatcher was professional about it, asking if I felt threatened if they were trying to break in. Standard questions. I explained they were my parents, but that I'd specifically asked them not to come to my house and they'd already harassed my tenants at another property. We'll send an officer out. The response time was actually pretty quick. About 15 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. I watched through the window as this young cop got out and walked up to my parents. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see Dad getting animated, pointing at the house, probably explaining how this was just a family misunderstanding. Mom was still holding those flowers like they were evidence of her good intentions. The cop listened patiently, then walked over to the Ring doorbell and pressed the button. Sir, this is Officer Martinez with the police department. Could you come to the door, please? I went outside and explained the situation. Previous harassment of my tenants, repeated demands for my property, months of family pressure and manipulation. I showed him the incident report number from the rental house incident. Officer Martinez was completely reasonable about it. Do you want them to leave your property? Yes. Have you asked them to leave and not return multiple times? Yes. He walked back over to my parents and had another conversation. This time, I could hear Dad getting louder. This is our son's house. We have a right to visit our own child. Sir, your son has asked you to leave his property. You need to respect that. This is ridiculous. We're family. I understand this is a family situation, but property rights still apply. You need to leave now. Mom started crying again, but the cop wasn't having it. He was polite but firm. They needed to pack up their flowers and groceries and get off my property. And then they left. Officer Martinez came back to talk to me. He suggested I document everything and consider filing for a restraining order if they continued showing up uninvited. Sometimes people need official paperwork to understand that no means no. Monday morning I called my lawyer, explained the whole timeline. You've got grounds for a restraining order, he said, especially with the previous incident involving your tenants. We filed the paperwork that afternoon. I attached everything I'd been documenting over the past 8 months. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. I half expected my parents to fight it, but they didn't even show up. Judge granted the restraining order without any drama. 200 yards. They can't come within 200 yards of my house, my business, or my rental property. Violation means automatic arrest. I also changed my phone number that week, only giving the new number to people I actually trust. The peace and quiet has been incredible. No more manipulation calls, no more guilt trips, no more surprise visits. Just me, my pregnant wife, and our normal life. 3 weeks. That's how long the calm lasted before the next crisis started. I was at the workshop when my phone rang. Unknown number, but it was local, so I picked up thinking it might be a potential client. Hi, is this Joshua? I'm calling about the investment opportunity your brother pitched me last month. I stopped working immediately. I'm sorry. What investment opportunity? The rental property portfolio. Elias said you guys were partners in a real estate business, and you were looking for private investors. My blood went cold. Can you hold on just a second? I stepped outside and found somewhere quiet. Sir, I need you to tell me exactly what my brother told you. Turns out this guy, David, had met Elias at some networking event downtown. Elias introduced himself as co-owner of a successful property management company and started showing David photos on his phone of their portfolio. The photos were of my houses, my rental property, my personal residence, even a commercial building I just bought. Elias had been walking around town claiming he owned half my business. He said they had 3 properties currently generating income and were looking to expand, asking if David would be interested in investing $25,000 for a stake in the next acquisition. $25,000. This wasn't some small-time scam. This was serious fraud. Did you give him any money? I asked. I gave him $5,000 as a good faith deposit while I thought about the full investment. He said it would hold my spot in the deal. I felt sick. David, I need to tell you something. I don't have a business partner. I own those properties myself, and my brother has never invested a dime in anything I do. Long silence on the other end. Are you saying he scammed me? That's exactly what I'm saying. And you're probably not the only one. I got David's contact information and told him I'd call him back. Then I did something I probably should have done months ago. I Googled my brother's name along with my business name. The results made me want to punch a wall. There were business networking profiles where Elias listed himself as co-founder of my company, a LinkedIn page claiming he was partner and investment coordinator for my real estate business, even a Facebook business page he'd created using my company name with himself listed as the primary contact. This piece of garbage had been impersonating me for months. I started making calls, first to my lawyer, then to David to get more details about exactly what Elias had told him and what documentation he might have. David sent me screenshots of text conversations. Elias had even sent David a fake contract with letterhead that looked suspiciously similar to my actual business documents. But the worst part, he'd been using my reputation to legitimize his scams, telling people they could verify the success of the business by driving by the properties or looking up ownership records because the properties were real. They were just mine, not his. My lawyer's advice was simple: document everything and call the police. This is identity theft and fraud, not family drama. That night, I sat down with Kayla and showed her everything I'd found. This is beyond family now, I told her. He's literally stealing my identity to con people out of money. Friday morning, I called the police and filed a fraud report. I brought all the documentation, David's screenshots, the fake business profiles, everything. The detective assigned to the case was actually pretty interested once he saw the scope of what Elias had been doing. We see a lot of family financial disputes, Detective Rodriguez told me. But this goes way beyond that. Your brother's been running an active con using your identity and assets. They opened an investigation immediately. But I wasn't done yet. I had a better idea. I called David back and proposed something. What if we set up a meeting with Elias? Let him think you're ready to make the full investment, and I'll show up as a surprise. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop downtown. David texted Elias saying he was ready to move forward with a $25,000 investment and wanted to finalize the paperwork. Elias agreed immediately, probably because he was desperate for money. I showed up early and sat at a corner table where I could see everything but wouldn't be immediately visible to Elias when he walked in. Elias arrived right on time, carrying a folder that probably contained more fake documents. David played it perfectly. So, tell me more about how the partnership works with your brother. Oh, Joshua handles the day-to-day property management, but I'm the one who handles investor relations and new acquisitions, Elias said smoothly. We've got a great system worked out. And he's okay with bringing in outside investors? Are you kidding? It was his idea. He's always saying we need more capital to expand faster. I almost laughed out loud. This guy was doubling down on the lies even when he was about to get caught. Actually, David said, I'd love to meet Joshua and hear his perspective directly. Elias got a little nervous. He's pretty busy with the properties, but maybe we can arrange something down the road. How about right now? That's when I stood up and walked over to their table. The look on Elias's face was priceless, pure panic, like he'd just seen a ghost. His mouth actually fell open. Hey partner, I said, sitting down next to David. David here was just telling me about this investment opportunity you've been discussing. Elias started stammering. Josh, I can explain. Please do. I'm really curious to hear about our business partnership that I somehow forgot about. David was recording the whole thing on his phone. We'd agreed beforehand that he'd document everything for the police report. I thought maybe we could. Elias couldn't even form complete sentences. You thought you could steal my identity and defraud people using my properties as collateral? I said calmly. Is that what you thought? The coffee shop was pretty quiet, but our conversation was starting to draw attention from other customers. Elias looked around nervously, probably realizing how bad this looked. David, I continued, just so we're clear, I have never had a business partner. I built my company entirely by myself with zero help from my family. My brother here has never invested in real estate and doesn't own any portion of my business. David nodded. So when he took my $5,000, he committed fraud. Elias finally found his voice. Look, I was going to pay him back. I just needed some time to get things sorted out. Here's what's going to happen, I told him. You're going to give David his money back immediately. You're going to take down all those fake business profiles. And you're going to pray that the police go easy on you when I file charges Monday morning. You wouldn't call the cops on your own brother. Wrong thing to say. Watch me, I replied, pulling out my phone. Actually, let's call them right now. Elias panicked, started begging me not to involve the police, promising he'd make everything right, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, the same excuses he'd been using his whole life. But I was done enabling him. I called 911 right there in the coffee shop. I need to report a fraud in progress. The suspect is here with me now. 20 minutes later, 2 patrol officers showed up. I explained the situation and showed them the evidence. They arrested Elias on the spot for fraud and identity theft. The last thing he said as they put him in the patrol car was, Mom and Dad are going to hear about this. Good, I told him. Maybe they'll finally understand what kind of person they've been enabling all these years. David got his $5,000 back eventually. Turned out Elias still had most of it in his checking account, but the criminal charges stuck. My brother ended up pleading guilty to avoid jail time, but he got 2 years probation and had to pay restitution to his other victims. Because David wasn't the only one. The investigation uncovered at least 6 other people Elias had scammed for smaller amounts. Total damage was almost $40,000. When my parents found out about the arrest, they went nuclear, not at Elias for being a criminal, but at me for destroying the family. 6 months later, Elias and Daphne got divorced. She moved back to her home state and took his last name off her social media. Last I heard, he was working at a call center and living in a studio apartment across town. The crazy thing is how much better my life got once I cut off all the toxic family drama. My business is thriving. Kayla's pregnancy is going smoothly. We're preparing for our first child in a peaceful home without constant manipulation and guilt trips. Sometimes you have to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your sanity. I chose sanity, and I've never been happier. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for a healthy life.